what inspired me about my mother, Lynn Sheinkin, again and again, is how she would see people, how she would not see through people, but try to see through to who people really were. And I think that's, in a way, the foundation of her activism.
She had this capacity to really see and hear and be present and be patient, and a deep, deep belief in the core goodness and capacity and potential of all of us.
In her work too, I remember just one specific thing. One of the things she would do would be to talk to other members of the community, whether they were religious groups or police officers. And I remember her telling me, Stephen, I have to talk to a group of police officers tomorrow, and I'm very nervous about it. They're not used to hearing from people like me, and I'm not sure they're going to be totally accepting of what I have to say. But of course she did it, and I know how successful she was at reaching out to other parts of our community. And this actually happened at her funeral. So years later again, when a police officer told me, he was there, I think directing traffic or something, and he took us aside, the kids, and said, I really respected your mom. I remember when she came in, and some of the guys were a little hesitant to listen to her, but she really won us over, and we learned so much from her. That was the message that I remember. We learned so much from her. Yeah, I think about that too all the time, of how she kind of overcame that challenge and really, and believe, not just said, but really believe we can all work together.
I do think that I took from her that, it is through real connection that change can happen. It seems like a very simple thing to see people and to listen to them, but I think it was her superpower, and I do think that she understood that has to underlie any quest for social change.
Her presence was about freedom, about liberation, about undoing learnings and structures that limit, that diminish, that harm. Always curious, always exploring outside the box.
I think my mother came by that sense of solidarity very naturally. It wasn't a forced thing in her. I think it was innate from a young age, just kind of looking at the world. It was that sense of equality was just natural to her.
In part, I think my mom was just always that way. I just met recently with her younger brother, Gene, and he loves to tell stories of them in Brooklyn playing together. She was a protective sister even then. He tells stories like that. She just always, but she just couldn't stand by and not say something if she saw something that was wrong, or someone being mistreated, or even just a tiny thing that she felt was unjust or wrong. And I certainly remember that as a kid. It could be embarrassing when you're a kid and your mom just has to protest everything that's wrong, even at school, at a restaurant, anywhere. And I would, we were like the kids, Mom, it's okay, don't worry about it. No, you have to say something. And so part of that was just, I know it was just how she was, but her work with the center, I know that was evolved over years of becoming trained in that kind of work, and then getting really specifically involved in her therapy and in politics and in all the work that she did. It was all an expression of that part of her that just couldn't not get involved, that had to speak up.
Way before I met Lynn, Lynn deeply connected to and involved in organizing the Rockland, now National Organization for Women's chapter with Phyllis Frank, engaging in consciousness raising circles, houses, places all around Rockland County. And that was also fertile ground for really changing the narrative Changing the stories we tell ourselves.
When I think of her, the term joyful warrior, and maybe it's a throwaway line now when people talk about politics and it becomes partisan, but when I think of her as in that way. She was always smiling, not literally always smiling, but in my mind, she was happy and smiling, but always working at something.
I love that Lynn dedicated her capacious knowledge and her deep values and her phenomenal skills to really co-creating a youth-led movement, really investing in the SETA project and empowering the multiple voices of high school leaders to end violence, end dating violence, to incorporate a critical consciousness around structural inequality, to live in ways more loving, more inclusive, more equitable, to be a visionary leader, leading by first engaging the heart and then activating critical consciousness and doing the work, getting our hands dirty, marching, all the work of activism. And her work was local and her work was global.
My mother acted globally in her work for Amnesty International, for example, and locally for sure, with her work that she cared so much about for the Center for Safety and Change. But I know her best through the most local lens, which is how devoted she was to her own family. And I know that Mom did not want women to be seen just through family roles. So I don't know how she'd feel about my saying this, but the part of her legacy that I know best is the unconditional love and support she gave her children. And that is also a superpower. And hopefully the way that we parent or teach or pass along her sense of justice and compassion is part of her legacy.